I'm dragging myself home after a 12-hour graveyard shift, muscles screaming, eyes half shut. Remote in hand, I hit the button. The old garage door rattles to life with that familiar rusty groan, chain clanking like it's been doing since I was a kid. Then, bam, Brenda, the HOA queen who moved in 6 months ago, comes barreling across her manicured lawn like an NFL linebacker on a mission, phone glued to her ear, red talons flashing. 911? Yes, my neighbor just stole the exact car I bought this morning. I'm frozen in my 1969 Camaro SS. 8 years of overtime. 18 months of grease, sweat, and busted knuckles. My grandpa's toolbox still hanging on the pegboard where he left it. She's stabbing her finger at my car in my driveway. Sirens already howling in the distance. Real cops, real lights, real cuffs coming, for me. The metallic taste of disbelief floods my mouth. They're about to arrest me for pulling into my own garage. What would you do? Drop your wildest neighbor / Karen / HOA meltdown below and tell me where you're watching from. Your HOA can't possibly top this, right? Let me back up and tell you how I got into this mess. I'm Jake, 29 years old, and I restore classic cars for wealthy people who think carburetors run on fairy dust and good intentions. It's honest work. 60-hour weeks covered in grease, dealing with collectors who've never held a wrench but know exactly how I should rebuild their transmission. 2 years ago, I inherited this modest 1950s ranch from my grandfather. Nothing Instagram-worthy. The paint's peeling, gutters sag like my energy after overtime. But it's got something priceless. A 2-car garage with actual workspace. Walking in there still hits you with that cocktail of WD-40, old coffee grounds, and determination that Grandpa left behind. Willowbrook Estates sounds fancy, right? Don't be fooled. It's mostly blue-collar families who've been here since disco was cool. Mechanics who wave with grease-stained hands, teachers who know every kid's name, retirees whose biggest excitement is arguing about the best motor oil at the hardware store. But 18 months ago, Paradise got a snake. A luxury development sprouted next door like an expensive weed, complete with an HOA, and slithering in as president came Brenda Kingsley. Picture your worst nightmare of a homeowners association president, then add a BMW that's never seen rain and a lawn so perfect it makes Augusta National jealous. Brenda's 48, fresh from a divorce that apparently left her with champagne tastes and a beer budget. Public records don't lie about that $160,000 second mortgage she took out 4 months ago. The woman's got this superpower for showing up at your door with a clipboard and that smile that says, "I'm about to ruin your day for your own good." She'll explain why your grass is a quarter-inch too rebellious or how your work truck compromises the neighborhood aesthetic. When she says certain residents, the temperature drops 10 degrees. My 1969 Camaro SS, that's 8 years of every spare dollar and weekend, found her as a rust sculpture, turned her into automotive art. Complete frame-off restoration, engine, transmission, interior, paint job that costs more than most people's cars. 3 weeks ago, she won Best Restoration at the local show. The newspaper even ran a photo, me grinning like an idiot next to 1,800 pounds of pure American muscle. Here's where it gets interesting. The day after that newspaper hit stands, I spot Brenda at the classic car dealership, photographing restored Camaros and grilling salesmen about market values. Turns out comparable cars are fetching $85,000. When you're drowning in mortgage payments and your real estate license depends on maintaining property values, a neighbor with valuable assets starts looking like opportunity. The assault began with retroactive HOA fees, $250 monthly for houses that predated this HOA by decades. Brenda delivered my notice personally, that fake smile cranked to 11, explaining how we needed modern community standards. Then came the violation parade. Work truck parked overnight? Violation. Garage door open while working? Violation. Grass measuring 3.1 inches instead of the mandated 3-inch maximum? That's a $50 violation right there, folks. The pattern was clearer than fresh windshield. 92% of violations targeted original residents like me, sweet Mrs. Lucy next door, and Floyd the retired mechanic. The new development crowd? They got friendly phone calls for identical infractions. Mrs. Lucy, 74 years old, lived here since Carter was president, got slammed with a $400 fine for unapproved garden decorations. Her crime? 3 ceramic gnomes that had been protecting her tomatoes since the Reagan administration. The texture of injustice felt rougher than 40 grit sandpaper. That's when the light bulb flickered on. This wasn't about community standards. It was about demographic engineering. and my award-winning Camaro had just painted a target on my back the size of Texas. 1 week after my car show victory, I found a crisp violation notice tucked under my windshield wiper, like a love letter from Satan himself. Commercial vehicle storage prohibited in residential areas. I read it twice, wondering if I'd accidentally fallen into some alternate universe where logic had died a horrible death. According to Brenda's pretzel-twisted interpretation, my Camaro violated the covenant against business equipment stored in residential garages. Her reasoning? Since I'd won a trophy and gotten my picture in the paper, the car was now being used for profit generation and business promotion. The fine? $75 per day until the vehicle vanished from my property like some automotive Houdini act. The smell of bureaucratic BS mixed with the burnt coffee I'd just dumped on my work shirt created an aroma that could have stripped paint. But here's where Brenda made her first critical mistake. She assumed I was just another blue-collar pushover who'd roll over and play dead. That evening, I spread those HOA covenants across my kitchen table like a general planning the invasion of Normandy, armed with a pot of coffee strong enough to wake the dead and a growing sense that someone needed to teach this woman about actual law. 3 hours of legal archaeology later, I struck gold. My buddy Derek from high school had gone through a similar nightmare with his HOA 2 years back, and his lawyer had taught him something crucial. Commercial vehicle restrictions only applied to vehicles over 8,000 pounds gross weight. My Camaro weighs 3,400 pounds dripping wet, less than half the legal threshold. Better yet, Derek had learned that HOA covenants must be applied equally under federal fair housing laws, and selective enforcement based on personal grudges could land an association in court faster than a Camaro does 0 to 60. I filed a formal appeal with enough supporting documentation to choke a paralegal. Vehicle registration, manufacturer specifications, weight certificates from 3 different sources, and, because I've always believed in fighting fire with napalm, photos of Brenda's husband's boat trailer camping in their driveway like a beached whale. That maritime monument weighed 12,000 pounds minimum, making it an actual commercial vehicle violation under her own twisted rules. Brenda's response arrived faster than a NASCAR pit stop, emergency board meeting, to clarify the commercial vehicle interpretation. The board was more rigged than a carnival game. Brenda plus 2 hand-picked cronies from the new development against Mrs. Lucy and Floyd, who had the backbone to represent us original residents despite the obvious career suicide it represented. The community center meeting room felt like a fluorescent-lit tomb, complete with folding chairs that creaked like haunted house sound effects and that distinctive smell of industrial disinfectant mixed with decades of disappointment. Brenda strutted in carrying a laptop like she was about to deliver the State of the Union, ready to dazzle us peasants with her PowerPoint wizardry. Her presentation featured artistic camera angles that made my garage look like the Pomona swap meet, complete with dramatic shadows and selective cropping that would have made a tabloid photographer jealous. She proposed a covenant amendment defining restored vehicles displayed for show purposes as commercial promotion, apparently unaware that her husband's fishing boat was more visible than the International Space Station. I stood up with my stack of evidence, feeling like David facing Goliath if Goliath had a real estate license and a superiority complex. Weight documentation, equal enforcement evidence, manufacturer specifications, and the delicious irony that her husband's aquatic garage queen was the only actual commercial vehicle violation in the entire neighborhood. Mrs. Lucy rose to her full 4'11" height and delivered testimony that would have made Clarence Darrow weep with pride, documenting the systematic harassment targeting original residents while the new development folks got friendly phone calls for identical infractions. The vote? 3-2, because apparently logic is just a suggestion when you've got the numbers. Commercial vehicle ban officially expanded to include show vehicles. The taste of injustice lingered like bad gas station coffee. But then I discovered something that changed the entire game. While digging through public records for my appeal, I'd stumbled across Brenda's real estate listings on the MLS database. Every single property she marketed featured bullet points about strict vehicle covenants and exclusive neighborhood standards as premium selling features. One listing literally advertised HOA enforcement ensuring only appropriate vehicles as a neighborhood benefit. She wasn't enforcing arbitrary community standards. She was weaponizing HOA harassment as a marketing strategy, using our misery to sell houses to buyers willing to pay extra for guaranteed conformity. My violation wasn't about rules. It was about creating a success story she could pitch to future clients. I had 30 days to remove my Camaro or watch daily fines drain my bank account like a financial vampire. Floyd offered garage space 25 miles away, but storing my car felt like admitting defeat. As neighbors started avoiding eye contact, terrified they'd be next on Brenda's violation hit parade, I realized this battle had grown bigger than my driveway. This was about whether working people could still afford to live in their own neighborhoods, or if we'd all get priced out one bogus violation at a time. Time to show this real estate shark that she'd just bit off more than she could chew. Moving my Camaro to Floyd's garage felt like retreating with my tail between my legs, but sometimes you've got to step back to plan your counterattack. That $75 a month stung. Money I could have spent on the new carburetor I'd been eyeing, but it bought me something more valuable. Time to build an airtight case. My first move was installing security cameras around my property. Nothing fancy, just basic HD units that could capture Brenda's shenanigans in glorious detail. If she wanted to play surveillance games, I'd show her how it's done by someone who actually read the manual. The smell of fresh electrical work mixing with my morning coffee became my new favorite breakfast combination. Then I created what I dubbed the violation database, a spreadsheet that would make an accountant weep with joy. 3 weeks of data entry revealed a pattern more obvious than a 20-car pileup. 89% of violations hammered original residents, while the new development crowd got friendly phone calls for identical infractions. But Brenda wasn't napping. She launched her Neighborhood Safety Patrol, which was really just organized harassment with clipboards and matching visors. Every morning at 7 a.m. sharp, she'd lead her small army of loyal residents on compliance walks, photographing violations that required a magnifying glass to see. My daily violation parade became almost entertaining. Work boots on the porch, $25 fine, garden hose coiled counterclockwise instead of clockwise, $50. Mailbox showing paint chips you'd need a microscope to find, $75 with daily accumulation. The texture of those notices felt rougher than prison toilet paper. One morning brought an anonymous love note tucked under my windshield, cooperate or face consequences. The handwriting looked suspiciously familiar, same cursive flourishes that signed my violation notices, but proving it would require CSI-level forensics I couldn't afford. That's when things turned seriously ugly. Someone slashed all 4 of my work truck tires overnight, clean cuts that screamed, professional message delivery, $800 in replacement costs and 0 witnesses, because apparently my neighborhood had suddenly gone blind and deaf. 2 days later, a city code enforcement officer materialized at my door like a bureaucratic genie, claiming anonymous safety complaints about my garage electrical. The inspector was decent enough, apologetic about the obvious setup, thorough but fair. He found the kinds of minor violations that any 1952 garage would have: extension cord placement, unlabeled breaker, missing GFCI outlets, $350 in citations plus mandatory professional inspection. Even the inspector admitted the complaints seemed fishing expedition-ish, but city policy demanded following up regardless of motivation. Here's where Brenda's plan spectacularly backfired. My electrician Tony took one look at my setup and burst out laughing like he'd just heard the world's best joke. Whoever complained either flunked electrical school or was hunting for problems that don't exist, he chuckled, writing his report. Your grandfather upgraded this system in 2018. It exceeds current code by a country mile. Tony's written certification proved my electrical work was superior to most new construction, creating documentation that would haunt Brenda later. Sometimes the truth has a beautiful way of biting liars in the ass. During my research binge, an unsigned envelope appeared in my mailbox like a gift from the intelligence gods. Check Kingsley mortgage records at courthouse. Someone with inside knowledge was feeding me ammunition. The county records office revealed Brenda's financial house of cards in stunning detail. Her pristine home carried a $160,000 second mortgage from 4 months ago, decorated with late payment notices and one dismissed foreclosure filing. The HOA queen was drowning in debt, explaining her desperate hunger for violation revenue. Mrs. Lucy, Floyd, and 5 other targets started meeting weekly in my garage. The coffee tasted like motor oil, but the solidarity felt better than any caffeine rush. Everyone shared identical stories. Sudden violations for decades-old conditions, selective enforcement that would make a kangaroo court jealous, and subtle pressure to consider selling to appropriate buyers. The bombshell came from Dorothy, a retired teacher with 40 years of bully fighting experience. Brenda had approached her directly about selling, claiming she knew investors interested in fixer-uppers who could save Dorothy costly improvement headaches. Translation: sell cheap now or get bankrupted later. We pooled resources for legal consultation, an hour with a property attorney who delivered good news wrapped in expensive paper. The HOA formation looked legally sketchy, selective enforcement created discrimination claims, but justice required a $6,000 retainer none of us could afford. That's when Brenda's real genius became crystal clear. She wasn't just collecting fines. She was systematically bankrupting us through compliance costs until selling became our only financial escape. Every violation triggered expenses, fines, inspections, corrections, potential legal fees, death by 1,000 paper cuts, all perfectly legal and meticulously documented. But I could play the documentation game too. My cameras were capturing harassment evidence, my spreadsheet revealed systematic discrimination, and my growing alliance was building a case that even corporate lawyers might struggle to defend. The question was whether we could expose the conspiracy before it destroyed our community completely. The legal consultation hit me like a sledgehammer to the wallet. Justice costs $6,000 up front, and my bank account was looking skinnier than a NASCAR driver on a diet. My restoration business had crashed harder than a demolition derby, thanks to the economic downturn. Turns out when people can barely afford gas, they're not dropping $20,000 on vintage car makeovers. Every night, I'd sit in my empty garage staring at the oil stain where my Camaro used to live, doing math that kept coming up broke. Fight Brenda legally and go bankrupt, or sell 8 years of weekend dreams to fund a war I might lose anyway. The smell of WD-40 without the rumble of American muscle felt like attending my own automotive funeral. But our HOA queen wasn't content letting financial pressure do her dirty work. She launched an information warfare campaign that would have impressed a KGB operative having a particularly creative day. Suddenly, the neighborhood coffee shop buzzed with rumors. Jake's running an illegal chop shop. His restoration chemicals are environmental hazards. Those fumes threaten everyone's property values, and probably their unborn grandchildren too. Her Facebook posts read like disaster movie scripts. Concerned about industrial toxins in residential areas, she'd write, complete with stock photos of hazmat teams that had zero connection to my bottle of carburetor cleaner and touch-up paint. She organized a petition for enhanced environmental protection that made my garage sound like Chernobyl's toxic cousin. The pressure tactics multiplied faster than rabbits on Red Bull. Certified letters arrived weekly threatening legal action for my $1,200 in accumulated fines. Brenda graciously offered a compliance payment plan with 18% monthly interest that would have embarrassed a payday loan operation. She even suggested resolving everything by selling to a buyer she personally recommended. How thoughtful of her. That's when I noticed something that made my mechanic's intuition start tingling. Other original residents were getting identical, helpful suggestions. Mrs. Lucy mentioned a concerned neighbor, asking about downsizing. Floyd got approached about selling his maintenance-intensive property to someone who appreciated vintage character. The same script, different victims. My investigation revealed the con game hiding in plain sight. Brenda was conducting weekly house tours for the same group of investors. Guys in $1,000 suits driving cars worth more than my annual income, photographing improvement opportunities, and making notes about demographic transition potential. Every for sale sign popping up carried the same real estate company logo as her violation report letterhead. She wasn't enforcing community standards. She was running a systematic displacement operation, using HOA harassment to manufacture below-market sales that fed her commissions, while her investor partners flipped properties for obscene profits. One evening while polishing chrome in my garage, door cracked for ventilation, Brenda materialized like a bureaucratic vampire hunting for violations. 9:43 p.m. and she's claiming noise ordinance violation for the crime of existing while blue collar. My air compressor had been silent for an hour, but apparently breathing while working constituted disturbing her royal peace. "This noise pollution ends tonight," she declared, phone already dialing. "I'm calling police for disturbing the peace." My security cameras captured her entire Academy Award performance. Shrill accusations versus calm responses. Obvious fishing expedition for any violation she could manufacture. The texture of desperation was rougher than 40 grit sandpaper as she prowled after dark hunting infractions smaller than parking violations. But the universe decided to serve up some justice with a side of social media chaos. Mrs. Lucy's Facebook post about systematic harassment exploded like a viral bomb, collecting 47 comments from neighbors sharing nearly identical horror stories. 15 families were getting the full Brenda experience. Sudden violations for decades-old conditions, financial extortion disguised as community improvement, helpful selling suggestions from appropriate buyers. A local TV reporter contacted me after the online explosion. Apparently, HOA corruption makes great television, especially with David versus Goliath seasoning and potential fraud sprinkled on top. Then I uncovered the smoking gun that changed everything. Brenda's real estate license renewal showed a corporate entity called Willowbrook Property Solutions LLC, same address as the luxury development company next door. But here's the kicker that made my blood pressure spike. Public records revealed she was receiving management fees from both the HOA enforcement and sales commissions from every forced transaction. She wasn't just abusing her authority, she was financially incentivized to destroy our lives. Every violation notice generated revenue through multiple channels: HOA fines, management fees, real estate commissions, and investor partnerships. My neighborhood harassment wasn't personal vendetta. It was a profitable business model disguised as community service. The beautiful twist? Her own greed created the evidence trail that would eventually hang her. Corporate filings, commission records, management contracts, all public information just waiting for someone motivated enough to connect the dots. My restoration business was hemorrhaging money from her rumor campaign. My fines were accumulating like compound interest, and selling my Camaro looked increasingly like my only financial escape route. But my growing coalition of targeted neighbors, documented evidence of systematic discrimination, and security footage of Brenda's midnight violation hunts were building into something that might just expose her entire operation. The woman had made one critical mistake. She'd assumed working-class people wouldn't fight back with the same corporate tactics she was using against us. Time to show her how wrong that assumption was. Sometimes the universe drops breadcrumbs that lead to buried treasure. And sometimes those breadcrumbs lead to discovering your neighborhood is actually a corporate crime scene, masquerading as suburban paradise. My treasure hunt started when Floyd's cousin Danny, a construction worker who'd helped build the luxury development, mentioned something over beers that made my ears perk up like a German shepherd hearing a can opener. "You know that HOA nightmare you're living through?" Danny said, methodically destroying his beer label with the focused intensity of a man who'd clearly had this conversation before. The original developer kept some kind of management deal when they finished. My foreman spent months bitching about all the extra paperwork they had to file with some property management outfit nobody'd ever heard of. The next morning found me standing in the city planning office like a man possessed, requesting every public record related to our development. The clerk, sweet Margaret, who probably remembered when this whole area was cornfields and common sense, handed me a document stack thick enough to stop bullets. The smell of decades-old paper mixed with government-grade coffee couldn't mask the stench of corruption wafting from those files like a backed-up septic system. Buried in the bureaucratic alphabet soup, I discovered the smoking gun that explained my entire nightmare. A 20-year exclusive contract between the original developer and something called Neighborhood Standards LLC. The contract had been executed 6 months before our HOA even existed, meaning every homeowner had unknowingly signed up for this corporate colonoscopy when we bought our little slice of the American dream. Following the money trail felt like solving a Rubik's Cube designed by someone with a doctorate in creative fraud and a minor in psychological torture. Neighborhood Standards LLC was registered at the exact same business address as Brenda's real estate office, which coincidentally shared space with Willowbrook Property Solutions LLC, which happened to be kissing cousins with the development company building McMansions next door. It was a shell game so elaborate it needed its own PowerPoint presentation and a team of accountants with security clearances. The contract revealed the beautiful, twisted simplicity of their scam. HOA fines funded grotesquely inflated management costs paid directly to Neighborhood Standards LLC. Higher violation rates automatically triggered larger management budgets, creating a financial incentive to make residents' lives miserable. Brenda wasn't just collecting her HOA president stipend. She was earning management company fees and real estate commissions from every forced sale her harassment campaign generated. Every violation notice I'd received was essentially a profit center feeding a machine designed to extract maximum revenue from homeowner suffering while wearing the friendly mask of community improvement. But the really nauseating part lurked in the contract's fine print, written in the kind of legal language that makes normal people's eyes glaze over. Performance bonuses based on community improvement metrics. Corporate doublespeak for gentrification quotas that would have made a 1950s redlining specialist weep with professional pride. They were literally getting paid extra for ethnically and economically cleansing neighborhoods one HOA violation at a time. I spent the next 2 days haunting various government offices like a caffeine-powered research ghost, following paper trails with the obsessive determination of a conspiracy theorist who'd actually found a real conspiracy. The city planning archives revealed 3 other neighborhoods with identical contract structures, all developed by the same company using the same predatory management scheme. The pattern was more consistent than McDonald's French fries. 18 months of aggressive HOA enforcement, followed by 40% resident turnover and 35% property value increases that magically attracted their target demographic of higher-income buyers who appreciated well-maintained community standards. They'd turned neighborhood destruction into a scalable business model, complete with investor presentations and quarterly profit projections. The document that made my hands shake like I'd grabbed a live electrical wire was the original development proposal from 4 years ago. Buried deeper than Jimmy Hoffa was a section titled Community Transition Projections that casually discussed anticipated resident turnover rates and demographic optimization timelines, like they were discussing weather patterns or quarterly sales goals. They'd literally budgeted for driving out working families and replacing them with people who could afford their premium lifestyle product. My harassment wasn't an unfortunate side effect. It was the intended outcome of a carefully orchestrated corporate strategy designed to transform blue-collar neighborhoods into profitable real estate portfolios. The legal implications hit me like a meteor carrying justice from the courthouse gods. This wasn't just HOA abuse. This was organized racketeering that could trigger federal prosecution. Every certified violation notice constituted potential mail fraud, and the systematic nature of their operations screamed RICO charges loud enough to wake sleeping FBI agents. Brenda wasn't some power-mad HOA dictator. She was an expendable front person for organized corporate crime disguised as community management, probably unaware that her bosses would throw her under the bus faster than yesterday's garbage if the heat got too intense. The beautiful irony was that their own corporate thoroughness had created the evidence trail that would eventually hang them all. Every contract, every financial record, every management agreement was properly filed with government agencies, creating a paper trail more complete than the Kennedy assassination files. Time to use their own documentation to expose what organized gentrification really looked like when it wore a friendly HOA smile. Armed with enough smoking gun evidence to stock a Wild West armory, I called Attorney Williams back with the kind of confidence that comes from holding a royal flush while everyone else is bluffing with pocket twos. The conversation went from, this might be expensive, to holy shit, we've got a federal case, faster than my Camaro's 0 to 60. Jake, this changes everything, Williams said, practically salivating through the phone. With fraud this systematic, we're talking organized racketeering. My retainer just dropped to $3,000 because contingency fees on federal cases like this could buy me a vacation home in Maui. The beauty of exposing corporate crime? Suddenly everyone wants to join your team, especially lawyers who smell class action settlements with more zeros than a NASA countdown. My crash course in public records warfare taught me that every HOA must file annual financial audits. Independent reviews that Brenda's crew had mysteriously skipped for 18 months despite legal requirements. I learned something every homeowner should tattoo backward on their forehead so they can read it in the mirror. Any residents representing 25% of households can force a mandatory audit the HOA cannot refuse, delay, or bullshit their way out of. With 34 households in our community, 9 signatures could crack open their books like a ripe walnut. My garage transformed into resistance headquarters, complete with folding tables drowning in documents and a coffee maker working more overtime than a single parent at Christmas. Mrs. Lucy brought translation skills for Korean families who'd been quietly enduring harassment. Floyd contributed 4 decades of union organizing wisdom. Dorothy wielded grant-writing expertise that could extract funding from a concrete block. The aroma of fresh coffee mixed with righteous indignation created a perfume more intoxicating than any department store counter. I upgraded my security system to capture courtroom-quality evidence, learning that proper documentation requires more precision than brain surgery. Chain of custody protocols, timestamp verification, audio clarity standards. The technical details separating amateur YouTube drama from evidence that sends corporate executives to federal prison where the coffee tastes like punishment and the Wi-Fi doesn't exist. Creating our financial investigation meant mastering tools I never knew existed. County property databases revealed artificial market manipulation in real time, showing how comparable sales analysis could prove systematic price inflation when multiple below-market forced sales preceded rapid gentrification that boosted surrounding values by exactly the percentages in the developer's original business projections. Every displaced family wasn't just personal tragedy, they were data points in a corporate profit algorithm. My coalition expanded to 22 households, but more importantly, we learned corporate-level organization. Research teams, documentation specialists, media liaisons, legal coordinators. Our weekly meetings felt less like neighborhood coffee clatches and more like Pentagon strategy sessions planning the invasion of bureaucracy. Our crowdfunding raised $4,200, but local business owners contributed services money couldn't buy. Tony the electrician offered pro bono inspections to document bogus violations. Maria's print shop donated materials that would have cost hundreds. The neighborhood tavern owner provided his back room for meetings when we needed neutral territory, away from Brenda's surveillance network. Attorney Williams reviewed our evidence package and called it prosecutor porn. Comprehensive documentation that makes district attorneys cancel golf games and start fantasizing about career-defining convictions. Corporate contracts, financial records, audio-video evidence, witness testimony, and paper trails more complete than most congressional investigations. But our secret weapon was coordinated media strategy. The local reporter was developing a full investigative series, complete with hidden camera footage and interviews with former management company employees eager to trade corporate secrets for immunity deals. Nothing terrifies white-collar criminals like the prospect of explaining their business model on the evening news. I practiced translating complex fraud into simple human stories that would resonate with judges, juries, and television audiences lacking law degrees. The key was connecting corporate greed to personal devastation. Families losing homes, elderly residents facing financial ruin, working people getting pushed from neighborhoods they'd called home for decades. We prepared multiple formats: visual timelines for TV cameras, detailed analyses for prosecutors, emotional testimonials for community meetings, and social media content designed to go viral faster than celebrity scandals. Timing the audit petition required military precision: file too early and give them time to destroy evidence, too late and let them complete their gentrification project. We coordinated with media investigation and federal complaints to create pressure from multiple directions simultaneously, like surrounding a fortress with cannons. Here's something worth remembering next time your HOA gets creative with enforcement. Federal mail fraud carries 20-year sentences, and using postal services for organized schemes triggers investigations that make corporate executives wake up screaming. Every certified violation notice could become a separate federal charge. Our preparation included digital security worthy of spy novels, evidence stored in multiple locations, encrypted backups, secure communications that corporate opponents with unlimited resources couldn't monitor or hack. When this much money's at stake, people don't always fight fair. We braced for Brenda's inevitable counterattack: legal intimidation, character assassination, political pressure applied through every available channel. Corporate warfare that would make our HOA disputes look like water balloon fights between kindergartners. But we possessed something they couldn't buy, steal, or corrupt: the truth, properly documented and ready for prime time. Their own greed had created the evidence that would destroy them. Time to serve justice with a side of corporate accountability that had been marinating for 18 months. You know that moment when you corner a rabid raccoon and suddenly realize it's got absolutely nothing left to lose? That's exactly what happened when Brenda discovered I'd been digging through public records like a caffeinated bloodhound with a law degree and a serious grudge. Her response hit faster than food poisoning at a gas station sushi bar. Emergency assessment notices demanding $600 per household for an urgent legal defense fund to protect our community from outside agitators threatening property values. The 10-day payment deadline came with lien threats that would make a loan shark nervous, plus language suggesting I was personally responsible for everything from declining home prices to the eventual heat death of the universe. The beautiful irony? She was calling me an outside agitator when I'd been here 2 years longer than her BMW-driving, lawn-obsessed ass. The hypocrisy was thicker than January motor oil. The intimidation campaign escalated to levels that would have impressed a paranoid dictator having a particularly creative day. Anonymous callers started flooding my employer with reports that I was under federal investigation for business fraud and helpful suggestions they might want to distance themselves from potential criminal liability. My boss Dave laughed it off. He'd known me for 3 years. But not every employer appreciates having their shop associated with dangerous criminals who restore classic cars. Fake licensing complaints materialized at the state level like bureaucratic mushrooms after rain. accusing my restoration business of operating without imaginary permits and violating environmental regulations that existed only in Brenda's fever dreams. City inspectors arrived based on concerned citizen reports about everything from noise violations to hazardous waste storage, forcing me to burn vacation days dealing with fishing expeditions more transparent than cellophane. The smell of desperation was stronger than a teenager's cologne as Brenda's operations started throwing everything at the wall, like angry chimpanzees in a paint store. Police wellness checks became my weekly entertainment, with officers apologetically explaining they'd received concerned neighbor reports about my erratic behavior and potential mental health crisis. The cops were cool about it. They could smell the bullshit from 3 counties away, but squad cars in your driveway don't exactly enhance your standing with neighbors who weren't already Team Jake. My clients started getting mysterious phone calls questioning my stability and business practices, complete with helpful recommendations for other shops that were more reliable and less controversial. 3 customers canceled projects after these character assassination attempts, costing me thousands while proving Brenda was willing to destroy my livelihood to protect her scam. But while our HOA queen was busy playing amateur spy, my security cameras were capturing footage that would make federal prosecutors cancel their golf games. She was conducting what looked suspiciously like real estate tours every Tuesday and Thursday, showing the same group of investors around while photographing improvement opportunities and making notes about transition potential. The audio goldmine was even better. I recorded her telling potential buyers about upcoming neighborhood improvements and demographic transition opportunities that would significantly enhance property values once certain problematic residents were addressed through proper channels. She was literally marketing gentrification as an investment strategy, complete with PowerPoint presentations and profit projections. Meanwhile, her emergency assessment was creating the financial crisis she'd been manufacturing one violation at a time. 18 households refused payment, triggering lien threats against elderly residents already drowning in manufactured fines. Mrs. Lucy, sweet 74-year-old who'd never hurt a fly, received foreclosure papers for $850 in accumulated violations that were obviously fraudulent. The texture of rage felt rougher than 40 grit sandpaper as I watched corporate greed targeting the most vulnerable people in our community. Then came the game-changing twist that made my investigator heart sing like a perfectly tuned V8. Corporate panic had made them sloppy, and sloppy criminals leave evidence trails wider than superhighways. A former management company employee, let's call him Deep Throat with a conscience, contacted me through encrypted email with internal documents that blew the lid off their entire operation. Training materials for community demographic management read like instruction manuals for organized harassment, quota systems for violation generation, performance bonuses tied to resident transition rates, expansion plans targeting 12 other communities using identical displacement tactics. They weren't just destroying neighborhoods. They were franchising social engineering like it was fast food for corporate predators. The corporate counterstrike intensified as news of my investigation leaked through their network like water through a cracked dam. Anonymous flyers appeared overnight claiming I had a violent criminal background and posed serious safety threats. Complete fabrications designed to turn neighbors against me. Fake complaints about every coalition member flooded city offices, creating bureaucratic chaos that would have impressed Soviet-era apparatchiks. But their corporate arrogance became their fatal weakness. Development executives started pressuring city council members who'd received their campaign donations, not realizing those financial connections were public record. They were creating corruption evidence while trying to suppress a corruption investigation, criminal genius at its finest. The timeline accelerated like a drag race toward justice. Local news confirmed their exposé would air next week, state investigators opened formal inquiries, and federal prosecutors were reviewing referrals with the enthusiasm of kids on Christmas morning. Corporate lawyers tried intimidating media outlets through advertising threats, but investigative reporters live for that kind of pushback. It confirms they're onto something worth exposing. I moved my Camaro back to my garage as a symbol of resistance visible from low Earth orbit. The neighborhood surveillance network expanded as residents started documenting everything, creating evidence collection that would make the FBI jealous. Their escalating desperation was creating more proof of the conspiracy we were exposing. Every intimidation attempt, every anonymous threat, every fraudulent complaint was being documented and traced back to their network. They'd spent 18 months systematically destroying our community, but their panic was about to destroy them right back. When cornered animals get desperate, they either run or attack with everything they've got. Brenda chose option 3, completely lose her damn mind in the most spectacular corporate meltdown since the Hindenburg decided to cosplay as a firework. Her emergency HOA meeting notice arrived like a declaration of war written by someone who'd clearly been huffing paint fumes. Immediate community stabilization measures to address the extremist threat to property values and neighborhood safety. The agenda included mandatory architectural review for any exterior work, including mailbox painting, and a special assessment of $1,200 per household for legal costs defending community standards against radical agitators. She was also attempting to change HOA bylaws overnight to prevent residents from accessing financial records, which is like trying to hide a murder weapon after the CSI teams already bagged it for evidence. The smear campaign that followed would have impressed a totalitarian regime's propaganda minister having a nervous breakdown. Mass mailings hit every household featuring my photo. Where she got it, I'll never know, with headlines screaming, "Protect your investment from anti-community extremists." The flyers claimed I was leading an anti-property value conspiracy, funded by outside radical organizations, trying to destroy suburban family values. She organized her loyal residents to flood the next city council meeting armed with talking points about how my criminal harassment of innocent HOA officials was threatening everyone's home equity and probably their children's college funds too. But while Brenda was busy playing amateur propagandist, my security system was capturing evidence that would make Hollywood scriptwriters weep with envy. She was meeting with corporate executives right there in our neighborhood, apparently too panicked to maintain operational security. The audio quality was crystal clear as they discussed accelerating transition timelines and damage control protocols. That sounded suspiciously like plans to destroy evidence and intimidate witnesses. The conversations revealed something that made my blood pressure spike like a rocket launch. They were planning to expand this exact scheme to 3 neighboring communities, treating our displacement as a successful beta test for mass gentrification franchising. Corporate crisis management kicked into overdrive with the subtlety of a demolition derby in a china shop. They hired private investigators to dig up dirt on every coalition member, apparently unaware that harassment campaigns against federal witnesses tend to add extra charges to the eventual indictment. The PI following me around was about as inconspicuous as a neon sign advertising guilty conscience investigation services. Development company lawyers filed restraining orders claiming I was interfering with legitimate business operations and stalking corporate representatives. Apparently, photographing people in public places while they commit federal crimes constitutes harassment in their legal universe. Meanwhile, 5 more families received foreclosure notices for accumulated HOA fines, creating exactly the kind of humanitarian crisis that makes evening news producers cancel their dinner plans. Elderly residents were organizing an exodus due to financial pressure they couldn't survive on fixed incomes, while coalition members reported workplace harassment through corporate connections that reached into businesses across 3 counties. The timeline was accelerating faster than a nitrous-powered drag racer toward a very public reckoning. Federal financial crimes investigators had requested all my documentation. Apparently, organized mail fraud gets their attention quicker than celebrity scandals. Corporate bank accounts were frozen pending investigation, and Brenda's real estate license got suspended faster than a speeding ticket in a school zone. But the real bombshell came from my growing network of whistleblowers. 3 additional former employees provided internal documents revealing identical schemes operating in 12 communities across the state, complete with corporate training videos for community demographic optimization that looked like instruction manuals for ethnic cleansing with HOA bylaws. The smoking gun video showed corporate executives celebrating transition success rates, while discussing profit margins from resident displacement initiatives, like they were analyzing quarterly earnings reports. They'd turned neighborhood destruction into a PowerPoint presentation with charts, graphs, and projected ROI calculations. Then I discovered the political corruption angle that tied everything together with a bow made of felony charges. Public records revealed City Council member Richard Thompson had received $15,000 in consulting fees from the development company while voting on permits and zoning variances. The same councilman was now pushing expedited approvals for 3 new company projects, creating a corruption paper trail more obvious than a highway billboard. The media firestorm was building momentum like a Category 5 hurricane made of justice and public outrage. National outlets picked up the story after local coverage went viral, complete with documentary filmmakers and investigative journalists who specialized in corporate fraud cases. Social media attention exploded with #HOA fraud trending alongside thousands of similar stories from victims across the country. But Brenda's final desperate move proved that panic makes people stupid in ways that defy rational explanation. She organized a counter-petition claiming my anti-American activities threatened traditional neighborhood values and demanding city council protect law-abiding citizens from radical extremists. The language was so over the top it read like parody written by someone who'd never actually met a radical extremist but had strong opinions about what they probably believed. Federal agents started attending public meetings as interested observers, which tends to make corporate executives nervous about their freedom and future travel plans. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit doesn't show up for routine HOA disputes. They investigate organized criminal enterprises that use the mail system to defraud victims across state lines. Corporate lawyers attempted one last Hail Mary by claiming attorney-client privilege covered their criminal conspiracy, apparently unaware that privilege doesn't protect evidence of ongoing crimes or future fraud planning. The beautiful irony was that their escalating desperation created more evidence of the systematic criminal enterprise we were exposing. Every intimidation attempt, every fraudulent document, every attempt to destroy evidence was being recorded and documented by federal investigators who really don't appreciate corporate executives treating witness intimidation like a competitive sport. My final preparation involves something I never thought I'd need: media training for congressional testimony. Apparently, when your local HOA dispute becomes evidence of nationwide corporate fraud, politicians want to ask questions on television while looking appropriately outraged about threats to American homeownership. The stage was set for a public confrontation that would determine whether corporate predators could continue destroying working-class communities with impunity, or whether justice would finally catch up with people who thought money could buy immunity from consequences. Time to find out which vision of America would win. The Willowbrook City Council chambers hadn't seen this much drama since the Great Zoning War of 2018, when Mrs. Patterson fought City Hall over her backyard chicken coop. Tonight, the place was packed tighter than a rush-hour subway car, with local TV crews setting up equipment that would have impressed a Hollywood production and enough tension in the air to power a small city. The smell of nervous sweat mixed with industrial-strength coffee created an aroma that screamed democracy in action, while fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry wasps preparing for battle. I sat in the front row with my banker's box of evidence, feeling like David facing Goliath if Goliath had a law degree and a serious public relations problem. Brenda arrived fashionably late with an entourage that looked like a corporate crisis management wet dream. Development company attorney in a suit worth more than my annual insurance premiums, crisis PR representative clutching talking points like sacred scripture, and two nervous executives who kept checking their phones like they were expecting bad news with federal postmarks. They'd clearly prepared for routine damage control, expecting to spin this as a community disruption caused by my unreasonable demands and outside agitation. What they hadn't prepared for was walking into a federal investigation disguised as a city council meeting. The council recognized me for public comment, and I stood up with the kind of confidence that comes from holding evidence so damning it could convict a saint. I'm here tonight to expose organized fraud that's been destroying our neighborhood while disguising itself as community management. The room went silent except for camera shutters clicking like mechanical cicadas as I projected my timeline onto the chamber's display screen. 18 months of systematic harassment correlated with forced property sales, complete with profit margins and corporate celebration videos that made their community improvement claims look about as credible as a $3 bill. Audio playback filled the chamber with Brenda's own voice discussing demographic transition opportunities and resident displacement initiatives, like she was analyzing quarterly earnings instead of destroying families' lives. The corporate executives started shifting in their seats like they were sitting on fire ants, while their attorney began frantically scribbling notes that probably said, "Oh shit," in elegant legal cursive. I revealed the financial flowchart that connected every dot. HOA fines feeding management fees, feeding real estate commissions, feeding development profits in a closed loop designed to extract maximum revenue from homeowner misery. Corporate contracts showing 20-year exclusive management agreements that residents never knew they'd signed. Internal emails about community demographic optimization that read like instruction manuals for legal ethnic cleansing. That's when Brenda's composure cracked like an egg hitting concrete. "Lies! This is character assassination!" she screamed, jumping up like someone had electrified her chair. You can't let him spread these fabricated lies about honest business practices. She demanded the council stop my criminal conspiracy against law-abiding community leaders, apparently forgetting she was being recorded by every news outlet in 3 counties. The corporate attorney tried invoking proprietary business information to shut down my presentation, which is lawyer speak for "please make the damning evidence stop existing." But the beautiful moment came when Brenda's mask finally slipped completely. Red-faced and trembling with rage, she shouted the quiet part out loud. "These people don't belong in our neighborhood. We're trying to improve property values and maintain appropriate standards." The federal agent sitting in the back row chose that exact moment to identify himself, standing up like justice personified in a government-issued suit. "Agent Martinez, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We're conducting an ongoing investigation into organized fraud schemes involving HOA management and mail fraud violations." The chamber erupted like someone had just announced free beer and universal health care as Agent Martinez served subpoenas for corporate financial records right there in front of God, Country, and Channel 7's investigative team. Development company executives tried to leave but found themselves blocked by reporters asking uncomfortable questions about community demographic management and resident transition quotas. The community response was everything I'd hoped for and more. Mrs. Lucy testified about financial hardship from frivolous fines, her voice steady but her hands shaking as she described choosing between groceries and HOA violations. Floyd detailed intimidation tactics targeting elderly residents, his union organizer background showing as he methodically dismantled their community standards facade. Dorothy presented statistical evidence of selective enforcement that would have made a civil rights lawyer weep with professional pride, while other neighbors shared stories of harassment, financial pressure, and forced sales that painted a picture of systematic oppression disguised as suburban homeowner association business. The chamber erupted in supportive applause after each testimony, creating a soundtrack of community solidarity that no amount of corporate PR could spin into outside agitation. But the mic drop moment came when I revealed the scope of their criminal enterprise. $420,000 extracted from our small community over 18 months, corporate training videos teaching resident displacement techniques, and expansion plans targeting 12 other neighborhoods using identical fraud schemes. I held up my car keys like a trophy, the metal catching the harsh fluorescent light as I delivered the line I'd been practicing for weeks. This isn't about HOA rules. It's about corporate greed destroying American communities one violation at a time. I'm driving my Camaro home tonight, and it's staying in my garage where it belongs, because no corporation should have the power to decide who gets to live in their own neighborhood. The immediate aftermath was everything corporate executives have nightmares about. City Council voted unanimously to investigate HOA formation irregularities while cameras rolled. County prosecutor announced criminal fraud charges under consideration, complete with federal referrals that make corporate lawyers very expensive very quickly. State Real Estate Commission revoked Brenda's license effective immediately, and development company stock dropped 18% on after-hours trading as news of the federal investigation hit financial networks. Local news led with, "Federal investigation exposes HOA fraud conspiracy." Social media exploded with #HOA fraud reaching 2.3 million views in 6 hours, and my phone started ringing with calls from other communities facing identical harassment schemes. I drove my Camaro home that night with an informal police escort. Crowd safety, they said. While neighbors lined the street cheering and taking photos like I'd just won the Indianapolis 500. The sound of that V8 rumbling triumphantly down familiar asphalt felt like freedom, justice, and the American dream all rolled into 1,800 pounds of restored steel and determination. Sometimes David really does beat Goliath, especially when David has security cameras, public records, and a federal investigation on his side. 6 months later, justice arrived with the satisfying crunch of federal handcuffs clicking shut on corporate wrists. The headlines read like Christmas morning for anyone who'd ever been screwed by an HOA. Development executives face 20-year sentences for neighborhood fraud conspiracy. Federal prosecutors unleashed the full weight of RICO statutes on development company executives, treating their gentrification scheme like the organized crime it actually was. Mail fraud, conspiracy, racketeering, charges that carry prison sentences longer than most people's mortgages. Brenda's plea deal included 18 months probation, $75,000 restitution, and a lifetime real estate ban that made her about as employable in property management as a vampire working day shift at a blood bank. The HOA contract got voided faster than a bad wedding. All fines were dismissed and refunded, and our class action settlement distributed $680,000 among 34 families who'd been systematically targeted for corporate profit. Turns out, federal judges get really creative with damage calculations when corporations use postal services to defraud American homeowners. Our new HOA board looked like actual democracy instead of corporate tyranny in khakis. Mrs. Lucy became treasurer, bringing the kind of fiscal responsibility that comes from actually balancing a real budget instead of manufacturing revenue through harassment. Floyd headed maintenance with 4 decades of union wisdom, while Dorothy applied her teaching skills to bylaws designed to protect residents rather than extract their life savings. The smell in my garage transformed from desperate coffee and existential dread to fresh optimism mixed with the satisfying aroma of WD-40 and restored justice. My Camaro sat exactly where she belonged, chrome gleaming under lights that no longer buzzed with the threat of manufactured violations. But the real magic happened in ways Brenda's corporate masters never could have predicted. Our annual Community Heritage Car Show turned nightmare into celebration, featuring classic cars, vintage motorcycles, and Floyd's pristine 1967 pickup that he'd been hiding for 2 years. Kids run between the vehicles asking about engines while parents share coffee and stories about the neighborhood that almost got stolen by corporate greed. The car show isn't just pretty machines and nostalgia. It funds the Neighborhood Defense Legal Clinic that helps communities nationwide fight HOA fraud. Last year, we raised $23,000 for legal aid, proving that corporate harassment can actually strengthen communities when people refuse to surrender their homes to profit margins. Settlement money created tangible improvements that corporate community enhancement never delivered. Misses. Lucy's new heating system doesn't sound like a dying elephant. Floyd's roof repair eliminated the mysterious dripping that had tortured his sleep for 3 years, and 3 families kept their homes instead of losing them to manufactured financial pressure. Property values stabilized at honest levels without artificial harassment designed to generate real estate commissions. Original residents finally choose improvements based on personal needs rather than corporate profit requirements, creating authentic community development that actually improves lives instead of destroying them. The ripple effects spread like wildfire through a justice-starved landscape. My documentation methods became the template for fighting HOA abuse nationwide, while congressional hearings featured my testimony about corporate threats to American home ownership. State legislatures passed transparency laws requiring financial disclosure that makes corporate accountants break out in stress rashes. 47 communities used my research to challenge identical schemes, creating a movement that turned systematic gentrification into expensive legal liability. Documentary films, federal investigations, and legal precedents transformed local resistance into national reform that corporate executives really should fear more than quarterly earnings reports. The technical legacy includes security networks repurposed for genuine crime prevention instead of violation manufacturing, plus evidence protocols that turn corporate fraud into federal cases faster than you can say mail conspiracy. My handbook gets downloaded by legal aid societies nationwide, proving that organized citizens can defeat organized corporate crime when regular people refuse to be victims. 1 year later, I'm polishing chrome in my garage with the door open to spring air that smells like freedom instead of surveillance. A young family stops to admire my restoration work, and their toddler plays with toy cars on the floor where my grandfather's tools hang exactly where they belong. Mrs. Lucy's garden gnomes stand proudly as symbols of diversity rather than violation opportunities, while Floyd's weekend projects become neighborhood gathering points that bring people together instead of driving them apart. The sound of classic engines starting for our community crews creates harmony that no corporate algorithm could replicate or monetize. Our story proves that corporate bullies retreat when working people organize with the same ruthless efficiency used against them. Legal systems work when evidence is properly documented, media attention focuses on systematic abuse, and communities refuse to surrender their neighborhoods to profit-driven colonization. Every American deserves to live in their home without corporate harassment designed to extract revenue from residential stability. Every neighborhood needs residents willing to fight for community control against organized gentrification disguised as property improvement. The texture of victory feels smoother than perfectly restored chrome and more satisfying than any corporate profit margin could ever provide. Share your wildest HOA nightmare story in the comments below. You might have legal options you didn't know existed, and there's probably someone in your community ready to help organize resistance against corporate neighborhood manipulation. Smash that subscribe button for Karen Stories, where regular people outsmart corrupt systems and David always beats Goliath, especially when David has security cameras, public records, and the kind of American determination that corporate executives should fear more than market crashes. Because sometimes the best revenge is justice served with a side of community healing and a perfectly restored 1969 Camaro rumbling in your own garage where it belongs.